Hello, thank you, Farah. Thank you, Stefan, for this presentation as well that provide an overview on the 3RF and like prepares for discussing it more and delving more into discussing what can be the concerns from a civil society perspective. From our perspective, actually, we would start reminding of development cooperation principles in general, and we like to refer back to a Busan Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation that sets the main principles for development cooperation, and that we think are necessary to remind whenever we are in a situation like this, and that we are not we are trying to change the model and trying to set new ways of working, but we need to go back to fundamentals. And here, by these fundamentals, I am talking about the ownership of development priorities by the country itself, in this case by Lebanon, so by Lebanese people in general, and not by the country. Issues like developing countries or donors, or in this case, the World Bank and the UN and the EU, having a role in strengthening the country systems instead of duplicating or creating new channels or bypassing the country systems and with different channels and systems. The third is more related to result-based management, and this is clear, and the inclusive partnership for development. So I wanted to put first these principles that kind of are umbrella principles that reflect our organize the work of development cooperation globally, and that we need to keep in mind. And of course, finally, transparency and mutual accountability, and here for all partners. I will not remind of the 3RF. Of course, Stefan did this very well. But while reading on the 3RF and following what's happening, the discussion that's being, and the media coverage around this, we saw that the Lebanese government did some commitments related to this. Also, it's not clear, it's not official, but it's also, useful to remind this, is to deliver on macroeconomic reforms, including the negotiation with the IMF on macroeconomic stabilization and restructuring of debt. The country also said that it will be working on the forensic audit of the central bank, so these kind of reform, and a commitment to prepare and approve the 2021 budget. So these are kind of commitments that came from the government, or it's been discussed, even if we are not seeing any progress towards this, but this was what was also mentioned. The IMF, and if you go back to what the IMF also discussed and said during the launching of the 3RF, is that the IMF will be helping in the reconstruction and the reform in Lebanon, and supporting a coherent fiscal framework, a credible strategy to rehabilitate the banking sector in the country. So to do all their parts and their support to restore solvency in public finances, to repair the banking system, and to strengthen governance, transparency, and accountability. Those are some of the statements that came with the 3RF, or in the occasion of the 3RF, by these institutions. So here we go back to the principle and think about conditionality and link between what is being imposed on the country in parallel to this support? Is this a conditionality or not? What kind of relation? And it's not clear. With this government, we cannot know if it is a conditionality, if it was imposed or not. It's not clear. I'm not saying that it was imposed, but this is what we read in the occasion of the 3RF from the different institutions. So are we linking this support to the Lebanese government, to the IMF? Are we linking this support to the changes in the, even the formation of the government, or to adopting like kind of economic restructuring, and based on what? And here, these policies were not, yani, if we are at a time that the people did not do their choices. They did not elect their new government. We didn't do we didn't pass this transition, the democratic transition, and all of these conditionality are imposed. If they happen, they are coming from, they are not owned. If we go back to the development cooperation principle, they are not owned by the people. So this is one concern, and we're not clear how it is linked, but this is something that we want to ask about. Also, if we are putting reform conditionality in order for the Lebanese government to deliver on these reforms, and if we go back to the history of the Lebanese governments, be it in 2018 or CEDR or Paris 1 or Paris 2 or Paris 3, we saw that this approach did not succeed. So what's new in our conditionality approach in the 3RF? Because this did not succeed, said it was the money, the funds were not unlocked because the government did not do the reforms. And previously, the money was disbursed even though the governments were not sticking to their commitments. So what is new in that perspective in the 3RF? Also, you said it, the Beirut blast is a reflection of the governance crisis, as you expressed clearly, Stefan. So how can we ensure that there is a government that is supporting or is part of the 3RF while we have this governance crisis? And how can we also disregard or bypass the government and go through other channels? If we go through other sustainable, this is also a concern. I saw that the 3RF is supporting some initiatives, some law reform that could be sustainable long-term in terms of governance, but it's not supporting the systems, the institutions themselves. So what was the thinking behind going into that approach? Concerning the social protection approach, and here the World Bank loan, the $246 million loan, which is a targeting program, also if we take it in the political context now in Lebanon, it can buy back the support of vulnerable families by the same traditional political parties. And even like the politics behind it and how the bill passed in the parliament, we saw that the same politics played, and they even were able to impose some conditions on the World Bank to make the. How is this also a new model in your perspective? This is a concern from our perspective. Also, we see that this targeting approach is disconnected or different from the long-term approach and of social protection, of universal social protection. We've been involved in developing a strategy with even with the Ministry of with the Ministry of Social Affairs. Sorry, Foreign Affairs is taking highlights today. Of Ministry of Social Affairs to work on the social protection strategy for Lebanon, and we did a lot of work on being universal approach, etc. And now we are taking an approach through these programs of targeting without having a clear link between, we understand the difficulties, the current difficulties, and the necessity to distribute funds to vulnerable families, but how is this linked with a long-term approach to social protection and to specifically universal social protection policies for the country. When it comes to financing and the ways of financing the 3RF, so as you said, there is two parts or two steps in the financing, and the first step will be mainly from grants, but the second step or track will be also it needs the role of the private sector, the intervention of the private sector through PPPs or blending finances. And the fund itself will be an endowment or an institution that can help in raising the fundings and ensuring the funding. This is fine, but this from the experience in Lebanon and in other countries, we know that this kind of funding raise concern about profits and benefits of the private sector over development goals. So how can we ensure that the private sector will be held accountable when it is taking part in development cooperation and in funding such an initiative? So all these concerns actually takes us back to the same principles of development cooperation. So what we are looking for, and to understand more, we don't have clear answers, or even our concerns are not clear because we don't have all the information. It's more like questions and concerns that we are raising here. Can economic and social reform, from our perspective, should come from inclusive and democratic policy processes and not be dedicated by IFIs or by donors in general. So how can this be taken into account? The international community should push for transparency and accountability and governance reforms, and this we accept, of course. We think it's very relevant and necessary in the case of Lebanon, but also should be pushing for integrating people into policy making. And what you're proposing in terms of integrating civil society is interesting to see, but so far, like the selection and all of this, we're not sure about how participatory it is. But also we would like to hear more how the 3RF could be strengthening national system instead of duplicating them, instead of giving more role to international NGOs. How it can be localizing the development and the development cooperation. On the side of civil society, how can also the 3RF and the civil society be increasing coordination and networking instead of this kind of competition between different actors in order for this initiative to succeed? And finally, private sector should be held accountable on human rights and development priorities when engaging in development cooperation. These are our main concerns and ideas, and happy to discuss more.